presidential initiatives on agriculture and agribusiness. Today, they are a member. Doc, thank you very much for your time and good morning to you.
Thank you, and thanks enough for having.
Well, so first of all, I want some clarification on this. Did you promise that no matter what the international price will be, you will pay the cocoa farmer over 6,000 for every bag of cocoa?
Well, clearly it's marks of intellectual dishonesty for anybody to suggest by shred of any imagination that one would be able to set a nominal price for cocoa in a very long time across time. Nobody in his right senses, nobody who has sat in classroom and has learned basic mathematics would suggest that you can have a flat price over time, and in which case it's even nominal. So what really happens is that every price is a function of the international price. And when they say something is a function of something, it means that it is either a percentage or other factors come in, but it's a driver. In mathematics, it's called a determinant. And so the FOB price is a determinant of the market price. And at a certain point in time in 2024, the farmer could have earned as much as even over 9,600 Ghana cedis. But at the point where we were talking about 6,000, 6,500 Ghana cedis as the prevailing price, the international cocoa price, which you call the FOB price, could easily be calculated, and if we are paying 70% of that, we would have been paying about 6,000 to 6,500. And so we made the point clearly that the current price on the international market is supposed to give us 6,000 to 6,500. Should we pay 70% of that to the farmer? And that led us to make the promise, a firm promise, that should we win power when we are running the cocoa affairs of this country, we will never pay below 70% of the FOB price. A promise we have lived up to. And that is why today we are even paying 90% of the FOB price. In fact, as at yesterday, cocoa price was $3,600 and something on the international market. Meanwhile, even the 90% that we are talking about was when we pegged the international FOB price at 4,200. And so this is a government that has been true and fair to the cocoa farmer. And never in the history of cocoa, and never in the history of Ghana's cocoa board, has any government been this true and fair to the cocoa farmer. Because never has any government at all paid up to even 70% than the President Mahama administration in the NDC one. And today, the same President Mahama is paying 90% to the farmer. The highest the NPP have done in their 8 years of reign in government was to pay maximum of 30% to the cocoa farmer, maximum of 30%. And so these are issues that must be spelled out very clearly and rather loud for the entire populace to follow. As for the farmers, they appreciate the nuances of these prices even more. But again, you would have these mysterious NPP people try to create the atmosphere of deception and deceive some farmers, believe that government is shortchanging them. And they do this shallow analysis of using the nominal figures to determine what really the farmer is supposed to earn. In actual fact, if you look at the current price that we are giving to the farmer, beyond the fact that it is over 90% of the FOB price, the farmer is now getting free fertilizer, getting free spraying exercise, getting free inputs. Inputs that he was going to use the same money to go and buy, he's getting that for free. And for those who have even done simple basic profit and loss analysis, knows that profit and loss is a factor of your expenditure and your revenue. And so your revenue that you are getting is 2,500 per bag. And you are spending virtually nothing in terms of your cost or your expenditure. It means that you would have enlarged your profit margin, contrary to how you were making in the previous years. And so these are basic things that the farmer really do understand. But you see, again, you have the deceptive, mischievous MPP who thinks that the farmer is that gullible and could be misled to the point of believing that President Mahama has not been fair or President Mahama is cheating them and all that. But even having said that, the reason why we are in this crisis and we have had to go through this difficult decision is because the MPP completely criminally mismanaged the sector such that they have left huge debt, huge crisis that we have had to deal with, and we are unable to deal with that, which is contributing to the crisis that we are in. The MPP left almost about 32.9 billion Ghana cedi debt, which is supposed to be paid by the NDC government. In fact, last year alone, the debt obligation that we were supposed to pay was 10.2 billion Ghana cedi. And we had obligations to pay cocoa road contract of billion Ghana cedi. And as if that was not enough, they had locked the country in a forward sales agreement that sold cocoa for $2,600 when it was being sold as high as $12,000 on the international market. And they couldn't supply. And we have had to supply over 333,000 metric tons of that. And all that we have to supply at the current price, which is about 7,200. And so that decision by even the MPP to gather the moral authority, to gather the courage, still all shame, to hold the press conferences they did is something that is legendary. I mean, it's unbelievable. This adventure is one adventure that no conscious self would attempt. And so I was shocked that I saw Kojo Nkrumah and his life gather in all shamelessness to do the press conferences that they have been doing. And yesterday I saw Afenyo Martin also take it up. Afenyo Martin should go and explain to the cocoa farmers in the city why the MPP government paid them only 25% of the FOB price when they could have been paying about 70%. They should explain to them why he was paying them 3,000 Ghana cedi when they could have earned 9,600. And there you would see that this group of criminals who have run down not only this country, but they have run down the cocoa sector, must be prosecuted, must be investigated, and brought to answer questions.
I see. A few things, though. There are those who have the opinion, and it's not only held by those within the New Patriotic Party. In fact, last Saturday, when you were on Alagina, before you came, it was an argument that our friend from SMG also made, that they feel that you should take the loss. Government should take the loss and cover the difference in terms of the new price and the old price, and give the cocoa farmer the old price because of the potential impact it might have on the cocoa farmer. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, the government has taken so much loss from last year. And that is why we are even able to give the 90%, and we was able to give the 70% last year after the October announcement. The loss that we have had to absorb from having to address the alone was about 150 million US dollars. If we were selling that cocoa, we would have earned about 941 million US dollars, which is almost $1 billion US dollars. That billion US dollars would have given us roughly about 10 billion Ghana cedis, which could have even allowed us to do even all the savings. But even granted that, when you do the price analysis carefully, you would see that at the time we set the October 4th price, which is the 3,625, the cocoa on the international market was 7,200. By the end of October, by 31st of October, cocoa was selling on the international market at $5,800. So within 1 month, the cocoa has lost over 1,500 of its value, over 1,500 of its value. And so that meant that all the losses that we have made of the $1,500, who will pay for it? Granted that even by the end of October, we had bought all the 58,000 cocoa that we bought under that price. That means that $1,500 times 581,000 metric tons. See the volume of loss that we would be making. 581,000 times $1,500. That takes us to almost about $800 million loss. So government has absorbed all this $800 million loss already. So what government is saying is that the cocoa we bought, the 581,000, we are unable to trade it because we bought it at this price and we are making this loss. But if we go to the market and we sell at the prevailing rate of 3,600, it means that the loss would have been doubled. So if the loss had been doubled, then it means that the sector would be collapsing. And so for the ones that we have bought that we are not able to sell, we would keep it. Those LBCs and farmers that we are owing, let Ministry of Finance mobilize some funds to Cocoa Board so that they can pay them. When that has been done and they have been paid, then we can now look at the rest that is left to the farmers on the field. So the rest that is left to the farmers on the field, because Ivory Coast and all the surrounding countries are also feeling the brunt and they have reduced their price. Let's also adjust and give the farmer 90% of that international price so that we can offload that pressure from the farmer. So the farmers that are holding their beans now and are crying that they have to pay school fees, they need money. Government is saying, let's go and buy it at 2,500 so that we can give them some money to go and live their lives. Once we look at changing and reforming the cocoa sector so that we can even offer better prices for them. And what is the reform we are talking about? We are saying that let's process 50% of the cocoa that we have got that we are not able to sell. And from today onwards, all the cocoa that we buy from the farmers, let's process it in Ghana so that we may be able to get better value and better price from cocoa. In actual fact, for every ton of cocoa that you process, you are able to make between 150 to 200% of the value of the cocoa beans. And so the value that we get on the market selling the cocoa beans, we would usually get about 212% of that value. And that's the thing about the cocoa dynamics. And so for those making those comments, those mischievous comments, they must be treated with contempt. But most importantly, we must also sympathize with the farmer whilst we try to explain to them that these are difficult times and governments will have to save the sector so that next season they can continue to be yielding from cocoa. Otherwise, next season, we wouldn't even get any money to buy the cocoa and go and sell. The cocoa sector would have collapsed completely.
And a few things. One, the NPP says you could have avoided this by doing forward sales. They also insist that this is the first time prices are being reduced, that they face the same reductions of prices on the international market when they came to power after 2017. They did not reduce prices, they maintained it. How do you respond to those two?
They never fixed anything like this. And as I said, they never paid beyond even 30% of the FOB price. So if you never pay 30% of the FOB price, no matter what happens on the international market, it doesn't affect the farmer because you are taking all the margin. You are taking 70% of the cocoa farmers' money into your pocket. So why do you have to even reduce the price? And they never experienced any price reduction of this magnitude in the 8 years of their governance. And so they have no business even making that claim.
I see. But what about the issue of the forward sales?
Well, as I said, the reason why we are in this crisis is the kind of dubious forward sales that they signed for this country. As low as 2,600 when it's selling for $12,000. That's why we are here. Why would you want to go and sign same dubious contract? Why would you want to even go and do the same forward sales? I have told you that, look, last year in 2025, for the first time in 9 years, cocoa was able to bring 3.9 billion US dollars into Ghana's crop. That is the highest we have gotten since Akufo-Addo became president. The highest. Akufo-Addo, the highest President Akufo-Addo got was in 2021, when our cocoa investments and the rehabilitations we had done in 2016, out of the 20 million cocoa seedlings that we planted, had yielded about 1 million metric tons, and we got $2 million from that. In fact, subsequent to that, it went as low as $500 million in a year. In fact, in 2023, it was around $700 million. 2024, I think around almost the same. The previous one was $500 million. So we were not even making $1 billion. But last year alone, with all the crisis and with all the debt and with all the rollover obligations, the fuel that the government sold to bring in revenue brought in $3.9 billion. And that is what strategy, tact, and understanding the sector yield. You understand? And so, beyond all the losses that we have made, the $800 million that I alluded to, we were able to bring in $3.9 billion. So imagine that we didn't have all these prices. It meant that we could have brought in over $5 billion historically to the cocoa sector.
Mm. Well, I see. There was some practical difficulties that Kojo Otokunor spoke about, and I want to take your opinion on it. That he talks about a buyer in his constituency who goes to buy prices at the old cocoa prices, promising the farmer that I'll pay you this amount. He's taking the cocoa, and now the cocoa is yet to give the cocoa to Cocoa Board, or either he has given it already and he has not been paid for it. So for someone like that, would he be paid the old price or would he be paid the new price?
Nobody buys cocoa from the cocoa farmer by himself, unless maybe he's a middleman or he's a smuggler.
Okay.
So usually, the LBCs have what they call the cocoa classes, who they give the money to, or they give the authorization to go and buy the cocoa. So when they buy the cocoa, immediately they collect it at the depot, the LBC depot. Then the LBCs would now process that cocoa for Cocoa Board. Now, if the Cocoa Board has not paid the LBC, it is possible that that person wouldn't have paid the farmer. But that means that the LBCs have supplied that cocoa already, so it's on the debt of Cocoa Board. And Cocoa Board will pay that. Every cocoa that had been bought before the announcement of the price is a cocoa that is on the records of Cocoa Board. And they have checks for that. And they are going to be paid with the old price. But any farmer that is selling cocoa from the date of the announcement will now benefit from the new price.
Two questions from those who are listening to us. First one says, Senator, please ask him if we still have the price stabilization fund and why the government is not calling on it. So it goes back to the question of find some money somewhere and use it.
The Cocoa Stabilization Fund, which we established under President Mahama's previous government, was collapsed by the Akufo-Addo government the very year they came in. And that is why we are in this crisis.
And then there's Enochu, who says, please tell Peter that we are fed up of hearing what the NPP did. We want to see heads roll. There are those who have complained that if the NPP had not started making loud noises about the situation in the cocoa area, you wouldn't have taken any steps in terms of audit, among others. How do you respond to this, that you know all these problems existed, but you're only acting and talking about it now that the NPP is talking loudly about the cocoa issue? And I'm sure you heard Afenjimaki also saying that all this talk about about people being arrested for doing certain things is only to silence them.
So the wheels of justice grinds rather slowly, and rather unfortunately, you can't do much about it. But you would see that from last week, there has been a lot of pressure on the Attorney General to zoom in on the cocoa matters and do what is right for justice and for the people of this country. And I believe that the Attorney General is going to do that as quickly as possible.
Doc, thank you. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you, Senator.
Dr. Peter BOAMAH Otokunor is Director Presidential Initiatives in Agriculture and Agribusiness, Office of the President, joining us on the line on the matter of cocoa board. There's a point that also came to mind. The thing he talked about in response to what Kojo Nkrumah said about prices falling during their end, and they never had to reduce prices. And the response he gave was exactly what came to mind. If I'm giving you 40%, 30% of the real price of what I'm buying from you, if the prices that I'm selling at fall, I can take some risk. I can take some of the losses. It's not